Grand Rising, I'm Raan Oosha and welcome to show number 5 on Conversations on Art, a show which was designed just by a group of friends that's getting together to talk about the challenges that they face, their creative process, and hopefully we can all learn and inspire each other. First, I'd like to introduce my co-host, textile artist and painter, Annie. Grand Rising, Annie.
Grand Rising, everybody, Grand Rising.
And we're joined today by multimedia artist, Claire. Grand Rising, Claire.
Grand Rising, hello.
And today's guest, photographer and musician, Kweku. Grand Rising, Kweku.
Oh, Grand Rising. Hi.
So, Kweku, can you tell us about your photography, please?
Yeah, sure. Well, it all started when I was quite young, maybe 10 or 11. Some of the local kids that I used to play with on the streets, there was one particular guy, a chap called David, who used to do his own developing, his own black and white photos, and I was very impressed with that. And he showed me all this kit and everything, and how to actually retrieve the negatives into well, an actual negative, you know, from the roll of film. And then I went on to do very simple black and white stuff. And then for birthdays and Christmases, I used to get sort of cameras and books and photography. So it's always been around from an early stage, you know.
After so looking at your photos, I see that you've used lots of color. And how are you creating the photos that you're producing right now?
Yeah, well, I just will go out, you know, with the camera, either specifically to take photographs, or I may be on way somewhere, but I'll take my camera just in case I see something that inspires me. But generally what I do is that I'll take a series of photographs and then I'll work on them using Photoshop. Now I do like colors, and the thing is that with a photograph, for me, I don't want it to look like a photograph. I want it to look as though it's sort of photographic art, if you like. Yeah. Now I can't paint or draw very well, so for me, the medium to express my, you know, creativity is through the camera.
So what's the difference in producing film and the Photoshop?
When you say
For you?
film, sorry, I'm not fully understand. When you say film, do you mean the old 35mm?
Yes.
Oh, right. Well, that, you know, you need a dark room, you need chemicals. It's quite time consuming. So for me, if it's all digital stuff, I can do it at, you know, my own leisure and the computer, you know. So for me, it's a lot easier. But I think quality-wise, the original film, you know, that is pretty top quality. It takes a lot of good digital cameras to actually get near enough what the old film used to be.
So how do you go about picking the subjects that you take photographs of?
Well, it will just come. If I'm traveling somewhere and I see a location, a landscape or something that I think will look good, you know, when I put my colors and stuff onto it, then it will just evolve. I don't necessarily set out to take a particular picture of somewhere. Well, I suppose that depends. If I'm going, say, down to Rochester Castle or something, I might take a few pictures of the castle. But generally, I just work on it and see how it evolves. Each time I take photographs, it's always something different. So I don't set out in my mind with a particular image. It definitely sort of flows and evolves. And sometimes I may look back at some of my older work and think, oh, I don't like that anymore. So I may revisit a particular picture and work on it further.
Hmm. Do you find that when you look back at the older photos, you see something that you didn't see first time?
Oh yeah, for sure. I think any photo will do that. You know, it depends on your, you know, your frame of reference at the time and what your frame of reference is now. You know, you can see different things that maybe evokes different emotions even, you see. So I think, you know, as humans, we do perceive different things in different ways, and over time things can change, certainly. Yeah.
Concerning the difference between analog and digital that was asked before, I had a further question because I happen to do, I'm mainly also digital in photography, but I happen to do a few analog rolls at some point. And then it changes a lot, the carefulness somehow with which I take each shot. In the sense that it's a really limited amount of photographs that you have on that one roll, and you have to have a certain amount of settings, and then each photograph becomes really precise, somehow the level of attention you give to it. And then I've always been digital. I was born with digital, and I grew up in that system, but somehow doing those few analog roles gave me the chance to change my approach to digital, because I tried to apply more this like really careful and patient, less click, 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 and more like looking for that one shot. But I wonder also, because you are a lot into editing the photos, which I tend to not do. I wonder how you deal with that difference of time, or if it's more about having lots of shots and then choosing, and then it's more in the laptop, the work, rather than finding the exact right shot while you are there in the moment.
Yeah, well, it's, for me, it's not a question of finding the right shot at the time. I understand what you're saying with analog film. You have to set everything up right because you have, you know, a very limited amount of shots that you can take. No, I actually derive a lot of pleasure from doing post-capture work, you know, in the computer. So, you know, my partner might be watching television, some of the soaps or whatever, and then I'm busy just doing my editing. You know, I get a lot of relaxation and contentment from that, you know.
Yeah. And I also thought you often have these images of these really close up of birds or animals, especially birds. I was curious, how did you have a super zoom to do that?
I don't have any zooms, no. I have to get very
How,
close.
how is, oh, you get really close. Yeah, I was wondering. Yeah,
I don't have any zooms. They're all prime lenses, which means that it's a telephoto, but it doesn't zoom.
okay. Yeah,
So I do have, yeah, a couple of telephotos. I've got a 400mm and a 600mm.
okay. Yeah,
You know, but you still have to get quite close because obviously the further away you are, the smaller the images in your viewfinder.
yeah. And the smaller the quality then if you're
Yeah.
too distant, yeah. But I imagine that does make this whole process of finding that shot and getting close to that situation does make, though you're not into post editing, the moment of finding the shot really relevant, because you really need to get close and wait for the thing to happen, or wait for it to move in that direction, or sit in a position and then follow it. Or I imagine there is some sort of tension also in the moment in which you're actually looking for the photo, and which
I
is
think
different from the edit. Oh,
with the wildlife shots, in a way, that's a kind of a different mindset because I have to go to a particular place where I know that some of those birds and things will be.
yeah.
So you know, I'll go there with my tripod and I'll set up, and it's just a waiting game, you know, because you've got no control over what nature will do. So you just have to sit there, and then you see something that might be happening. So then, you know, you start taking photographs and stuff. So it just sort of develops from there. really. But to get in really, really close, sometimes it's cropping. You know, you have an image and you think, well, that would look good if it's cropped really tight, you know. So sometimes that's what I do, but I do try and get the images in the full frame rather than cropping.
Okay, yeah, I imagine, yeah.
I think they're fantastic, especially those are the ones when I looked at some of your work, Kweku, going into the birds, it almost looked a bit, it was so precise, you know, the placement of where the bird was. It almost looked like it could be a stained glass window, because on one you had bits of the sprigs of the tree with the bird, and the color is so vivid.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, that is, I love the placement. I love whether you're aware of it or not, what you've chosen, how to place that visual within that frame of you know, the picture. It's really fantastic.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I use a couple of techniques really. One is that I squint my eyes quite a bit. So if you squint your eyes, then you kind of get an overall image, and the main subject is slightly off. If it's to the left or right, you kind of think, oh no, that doesn't feel right. So for me, that's the first thing I do is squint, yeah, and then sort of put the overall subject, place it within the frame that I want. Even if it's a cropped image, I can move the image around within the frame. So, you know, from my point of view, I place it exactly where I want it to be, but it just feels right, you see. And sometimes if I go back looking at other images that I've taken, you know, years and years ago, I kind of think, oh, I wouldn't place that there now. I'd do it this way. You see what I'm saying? So constantly my mind is evolving.
Absolutely. Absolutely. On looking at some of your work, Kweku, because I'm not on Instagram, so I was limited to how much of your work I saw, but what I saw I really liked, and there were a couple of poster print. They looked like 80s style poster prints. And I was speaking to Raan, and I said it reminded me of the 80s pastel. You had some where it's almost like you'd inverted the image. It was a car and just a building, and it really reminded me of that 80s poster art that we had back then. But I wanted to ask you, how did you do that?
I can't think which image that is.
It's almost, it's a building and it's got a car in it.
What, silver
and it's
car?
where, yeah, that's it. Yeah, but it really reminded me of that pop art that came out in the 80s. That was, you know, that sort of simple, you know, with the colours, and you know, we had a lot of the pastel colours. So it reminded me of that. So I wanted to, but you'd answered it already. You used Photoshop, so it's amazing what you can do on Photoshop, and it looks more like a painting than it does a photograph.
Well, that's right. I don't want my work to look like photographs, you know. So to me, you know, whether it's pastel colors or very strong colors, it's the overall image, you know. By the time it's actually printed and framed, you know, mounted and framed and put on the wall, I want it to look, you know, sort of almost like a painting, I guess. You can never quite have that same depth as an oil painting or a watercolor, but you know, as far as I'm concerned, it's the nearest that I can get to it. You know, that particular image I think you're referring to is that's down in Deal.
Oh right, down in Kent. Oh right, okay.
Yeah.
I liked that because it really, and it, what that did, Kweku, is it sparked me to go and research some of that pop art, and I came across an artist, a Japanese artist, who's just done similar work. Then he's done it as an ode to Hollywood. Then it brought me on to look at David Hockney. So it's like, you know, it was like, oh, I like that, you know, bringing back that sort of different style of looking at, you know, something quite ordinary, but you know, making it look quite different.
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure.
So I enjoyed that. Yeah, that was good.
Hmm. Yeah. So do you take photographs yourself?
I do. I'm not a photographer. When I did my degree, that's when I got into it more, because we needed visual research. So you need to work from your visual research. So in my second year, I had a fantastic hairdresser. He was really lovely, but he was actually a photographer, so he did both of the jobs. And in my second year, we had to do a project called Design and Make. And I had no idea. I knew what I wanted to do, but I wasn't sure how to do the photography. So Ed took me out, and he was the one that showed me the, you know, the f-stops, that, you know, all of the aperture, the lighting, and obviously we were doing it analog, as we call it. But it really took me on, you know, and I absolutely loved it. And from there, my film I developed, then I went into our dark room, and I was able to manipulate my own negatives, and I really enjoyed that, because on the exposure I was able to twist the paper, so again it changed the image. Yeah, so looking back at some of my old work, and you know, the difference of that, and then bleaching out, you know, the normal negative, putting it into maybe blue, or you know, changing it, really altered the work and your subject matter as well, which is also really fantastic. I wanted to ask you, I know with Photoshop I'm not so au fait. I am to a point. Are there ways of distorting your image, you know, like pulling it in and twisting it out, you know, really altering it completely from what the original state is?
Are you asking me, is that possible to do in Photoshop?
Yeah, yeah.
Very much so, very much so. If you got your image and you want to play around with it, well then you go into transform or free transform, and with the drop down menus you get things like distort, skew, you know, rotate, that sort of thing. So you
Right.
can manipulate the image. And if you do it in layers, then you can alter something, and if you don't like it, then you can just like delete that layer or whatever. So you should always make copies of whatever you're doing, just in case, you know, you don't like it or whatever. Yeah, but it's very easy to do.
Yeah, I remember doing that. Yeah, I think that takes you on to creating the layering, the transparency, and of having layering of a transparent over onto like a solid form. Yeah, that I need to get back into that and start messing around with that, because you can really create.
Sure, sure. I think with layers, that's probably, well, for me, that's the most important thing, because some of my pictures have maybe, you know, 15 or 20 layers that I work on. And then once you're sort of happy with the image, you flatten everything down just to one image, you see. But whilst you're actually working on it, if you keep the layers all separate, then you can tweak each layer as you want it, you know.
And who are the artists and photographers that have inspired you? And I know that you're a musician as well. Who within the music world has inspired your work, you know, your photography, you know, how you look at things?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I don't have anyone that I aspire to. You know, I think all photographers are great because it's such a subjective sort of field that whatever, you know, whatever picture you take, it's either, you know, you're going to like it or someone else is going to like it or they're not going to like it. So, you know, I don't really have any favorite photographers or even musicians for that matter. To be honest, I listen to all styles of music, you know, an eclectic taste. I listen a lot to Bach and the Baroque period. That's my favorite kind of music. But, you know, I listen to all sorts: heavy metal, rock, country, reggae, you know, drum and bass, anything at all. Yeah, there's not a particular genre that I don't like. Yeah.
This is to all of you. how does music infiltrate your other art forms? If I could start with you, Claire.
How does music inform other art forms?
Or your own art form?
Yeah. Well, on one hand, you sent me this music piece the other day or
Yes.
yesterday, and I listened to it today while I was working with ceramics. I don't know if it probably does inform the final shape of it, but it more informs my mood while I make it, I think. So it's probably more indirect way of informing the process, I would think, or my being in the process. So I would often, if I do work with music, which I often like to work with silence actually, but if I do choose to work with music, then I would choose a specific type of music that fits my mood or can stimulate a certain type of mood that fits my working process, I think. So I would talk of it in those terms. Yeah.
And you, Kweku, your music and your photography?
Yeah, I don't think the music necessarily influences my photography. I tend to listen through either headphones. As I say, if my partner is in the room watching television, I'll have the headphones on listening to music, or I may just do it in silence, you know.
And you, Annie?
I don't particularly, I guess it depends how I'm feeling. Sometimes, I mean, I think only recently now I've really connected with music, and if I'm connecting with music, then I usually get an image with that. But if I'm working, to be honest, I've always had a movie on in the background, and that could be anything from The Shining to Highlander. I've had Red Dwarf on, you know, to Miss Marple, all sorts. Anything that my mood's in, I generally have something on in the background. It's not necessarily music. I think it's more the visual, but I guess I'm still taking in the the noise or the information that's coming in from that. Yeah, but nothing specifically where I go out and say, yeah, I'm going to listen to, I don't know, something and then start creating. It's usually putting in a movie.
Kweku, how does photography shape your way of seeing the world?
Interesting question. I don't quite know how to answer that really. I don't know that it does really. It's just, you know, what I see maybe in everyday life. If I think, oh, you know, I can make a picture of that maybe later on. But I don't know that I'm influenced by sort of photographic stuff necessarily. No, I'll have to think about that. Maybe come back to you now.
Yeah, it's just that looking at your photos, and I see the prominence of the sky and the colors and the way
Nature.
you shape, with the way you shoot the sky, where you color the sky, and how do you do that, and why do you do it like that? And do you purposely look at the sky as something that you can change and manipulate the color?
Well, I tend to be looking at the sky a lot anyway, whether I've got my camera or not, because you know that often affects the weather and how you are, like your mood and stuff, you know. So with the sky, I feel that that's quite easy to change in my photographic work. Yeah, I can do that in Photoshop. So a particular image may be quite far as I'm concerned, maybe quite boring or bland if it's just got a grey sky or something. But then if I change that, then it completely lifts, as far as I'm concerned, the picture, you see. So for me, the sky, it doesn't matter if it's a dull day or a sunny day, I can make it how I want it to be, sort of thing, if that makes sense.
Kweku, this is not about your work, it's about Photoshop. If I wanted to get, forgive me, if I wanted to get Photoshop elements, would that enable me to do the same sort of distortion layering that I would, or would I need to buy the full?
To be honest, I've only ever used Photoshop. It's I'm not even sure the version I've got. It's to be honest, it came with the computer, but I was given Photoshop years ago by an ex-partner's, a friend of an ex-partner, for my birthday. It was on a CD, and it was very basic Photoshop. But you know, I managed to do everything, and it had layers and all the rest of it. So
Right.
I really don't know about any others. I know there's Lightroom and stuff, but I don't use that. You see, I just use Photoshop. I've only ever used Photoshop. So I think whatever version you get is going to be fine, really.
So that would be, because I think the Photoshop element is a more affordable way of getting Photoshop instead of buying the whole package, because I've had it before, but like you, it's been given to me, but my computer that I had it on, that's null and void now, so it's looking at re-getting that. And I wanted to know if you were aware of Photoshop Elements, which is a smaller, I guess they just do it as a smaller version of Photoshop that you can use.
I'm aware of Photoshop Elements. So yeah, in terms of what you get with Elements, I'm not entirely sure.
Right.
I only ever use the basic commands in Photoshop. So, you know, if you just want to do basic manipulation and stuff, I mean, there's lots of YouTube tutorials. So, you know, if you get your version of Photoshop, I mean, I think the recent ones, you have to subscribe to them, which is a bit of a pain. So, you know, it depends on really what you want to do with your work. But I think any old copy of Photoshop would suffice, to be honest.
Thank you. Thank you.
Again, this one's for all of you. I mean, if we go back 20 years and we had the camera with the film, then we had a digital camera, and now look what's happening with everyone has a phone now which they can take their photos on. Where do you think we're going to be taking photos in, say, 20 or 30 years? Can I start with you, Kweku?
Well, I think the camera is going to be hard to actually remove, you know, from the artist's eye. I think the camera itself, I mean, camera phones, they're very good quality images, but I think you can't substitute putting a frame up to your eye and framing something using an actual camera. But maybe in 20 years or more, it might be a chip in your head that you could actually just blink and then you've recorded what you see and then download it later on to your computer. I think that ultimately would be, you know, the path to go. Yeah.
And you, Claire?
Well, I think that in terms of like quality of photos, literally quality, I think today phones can do better work than lots of types of cameras. Of course, you have specific objectives you can change that give a specific effect or a specific framing. or focuses that are more specific in cameras, but I think that phones, I have a phone that I bought specifically for my camera, that my phone has in the camera of my phone, and I can use all the manual options of a camera. It's not as good as my camera, but it's in my pocket all the time, and I can still adjust aperture and time, and I can adjust most things. The quality is not as good, but if you get an iPhone, it has better quality than my camera actually. I do think that the idea of photography itself, or the use of photography itself, is taking a big shift in the time with the development of technology. It's just so easy to take photos all the time. If you just look at the existence of Instagram, people now constantly photograph every single piece of their lives and of their bodies and of what's happening around, and they keep posting things all the time. It's just a really different sense of photography than when the photograph only who had a camera could do it. That just, I think, changes a lot the whole idea of photography. So in a conceptual sense, I don't know where photography will go, but I can imagine that probably things like, I don't actually know, but I have the feeling that things can change a lot. Just photography is so affordable to everyone that just it's the idea of photography, I think it's changing a lot. I don't know, but I don't, probably photo manipulation and Photoshop, collages and edits and digital image will become a sort of evolution of photography, but I don't know if we can call it photography anymore, in a sense that it's digital manipulation and not photography. I would associate it with being with something and taking a photo of it, and in that moment adjusting. Then also your work, Kweku, it's a lot about digital manipulation more than the actual act of taking the photograph, and that already signs a sort of change in the concept of photography somehow. But I don't know in a technical way how that would develop. Probably we are going to have chips in our heads that just photograph every
Oh yeah,
eye
yeah.
shutter of our eyes.
That's the way to go.
Annie?
Do you know what? I really agree with what Claire has just said, because photography has come such a long way, even from me as a child. You know, not everybody had a camera, and you know, film was expensive, and we've come to the age now that everybody has a camera. So I mean, I use that quite generally, because you have your phone. So I don't know where it will go from there, but I like the idea of my camera. I like that I physically take it out and I use it, although I still use my phone a lot, as you know, Claire rightly said. So easy, it's in your pocket, everybody's taking pictures, and again, everybody's a photographer now. So, and you know, you could just take a picture, edit it straight away, and then upload it. You know, you couldn't do that before. It wasn't for everybody and it wasn't available for everybody. But now, I mean, I don't know, will we be using satellites? You know, we're already on Mars taking photographs, and you know, taking visuals, and taking, you know, listening to the wind blow on Mars. Who knows? But for me, I like the feeling of having my camera. I like, whether it's digital or analog, I like that, because it's still giving me that sense that I'm taking a photograph, that I'm physically doing that, putting it to my face. When I take it with my phone, I'm just taking it, you know, I'm just taking it. It's not the same as when I use my camera. So, but I guess that's my attachment to my camera that I have with that, and that's the that emotional and what I have to that. But who knows where photography will go, and if it will still keep its identity, you know, and how that will change.
I can imagine that maybe this attachment to the camera you're saying, I can understand it on one sense, but I also think all this like phone photographs and so forth also somehow reduces a lot the value or changes a lot the meaning of taking a photograph.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Photographs are thousands of pixels on our hard drives. Then it's way less precious somehow often. Then I'm not saying that photography is less precious. It's not that. But I mean this like constant phone photographing, or also I think also often with cameras there's so much of like just everything, and then no elaboration of it, or no, it's just this massing of information, and really rarely there's a sort of like selection. And I don't know, I can understand how you say when I take my camera out, this I feel it's different than when I use my phone. Probably that value of being with the photograph or taking.
I think it's the sentiment of it as well, you know, having what it's, you know, what that's attached to. But I get that, you know, if I go out with my phone, everybody's taking a picture, 1,000,001 pictures people take. You know, some people say, oh yeah, I've got thousands of pictures, and for what use?
But I think, you know, with digital phone cameras and stuff to record the moment, so many people take pictures of their kids, their family, food. You know, it's like this constant stream of, I don't know, existentialism or whatever, trying to just live your life through the phone. But that's one thing. But then, you know, how many of those people actually want to put stuff on the wall and call it wall art? You know, if they're not changing anything, they're just taking that moment to remind them, you know, document something or whatever, which I think is fine. That's fair enough. But if you look on Instagram, some of the actual stuff that photographers are doing, you know, it's quite amazing. And as humans, we have that imagination. And, you know, if you're looking at the millions of photographs that there are on social media, there's quite a few that are quite artistic and absolutely brilliant, you know. So there's always going to be a percentage, I don't know what percentage is, but there's going to be a percentage of art coming through digital media. You know, maybe if it's, you know, 20% or less than that, we've got to be thankful for that, because otherwise, if we don't have art, then we just might as well be living in a, you know, mono slab brick sort of
Dystopia.
design everywhere, you know.
How much of you, Kweku, in your art is your own self-expression, I guess your own personality?
Well, I think quite a bit, to be honest. I'm generally quite a happy, go-lucky sort of chap, you know, always on the bright side. My cup's always half full, you know, so I think that's probably reflected in my work, to be honest, you know. Yeah.
I've got to agree with you there, because those bird pictures were beautiful, colourful, bright, vivid, very alive. Yeah, beautiful.
So I think also it's just that, you know, whether it's a bird or a landscape or something, if there's something that you can, you know, bring to that picture to make it sort of just a little bit different, or, you know, to have some sort of connection with it, you know, whether it's a red sky or a blue tree or something, you know, you think, oh, yeah, I like that, you know. The world is your oyster, isn't it? You can make it whatever you want. You don't have to like it, but if you enjoy doing it, well then, you know, I'll do it for myself. I don't do it for other people.
Does taking a photo of a person, a thing, does that give you a connection which always lasts? for instance, if you're taking a photo of a bird and you're close up, like you said, does that kind of emote kind of feelings always when you look back at that photo?
So sometimes a photo can take me back instantly to the scenes where I took it, you know, and then others, you know, maybe if it's, I just can't think at the moment, but generally I think any photo I take, it places me back there, and it depending on what's happening at the time. And if I get close to an animal, I mean, that animal's perception of me, I often wonder what the animal thinks of me being around, you know, and thinks about our world and all that. You know, the animal's got its own problems, whether it's being preyed upon by an apex predator or whatever. It's not really thinking about taxes and VAT and all that kind of rubbish, you know, that's attached to our world. So to a certain extent, when you're in the zone and you're taking pictures, you do have a connection with the subject matter. Even if you're just taking straightforward portraits, you want to be able to get the character of that person that you're taking a picture of, yeah, to convey to that person or to other people the character and essence of that person. So whether it's a landscape or an animal that you're taking a picture of, it's the same sort of thing. You have to connect with it. Otherwise, you're not really going to be able to draw sort of emotion and stuff out of it, if that makes sense.
So with your favorite photos or the photos that you like, is there always an emotional connection that you felt while taking the photo?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it depends. If I'm on sort of holiday somewhere and I'm taking snaps, I mean, I don't always take photographs just to make art out of it. You know, I'm taking photographs just to record the situation, document it, and then from that, maybe later on, depending how many I've taken, I think, oh, actually, that might work if I do this or do that to it. You see what I'm saying? So sometimes I'm just taking photographs as a spectator somewhere, but other times I'm taking photographs specifically to think, well, I could use that later on, or you know, an idea may come to me at the time. Oh, look at that! You know, that's really good. That would make a great photograph, or whatever. You know. Yeah.
This is for all three of you. I'll start with you, Annie. What role does love come into taking a great photo?
Oh, I think that depends on my subject matter. That's a really good question. It could be the love of my creativity, depending on who or what I'm looking at. I don't know if I can, I'm not sure if I can answer that. Or in what way I can answer that for you. If I'm taking photographs of my niece and nephew, yes, I think they come from a lot of love. When I'm running around and just taking references of things, as Becky's saying, you know, you're taking pictures and oh, you see something. I don't think that comes from love. I think that just comes from, you know, wow, I want to keep that idea and have a note of it, and that's where I'll take a picture and I'll keep that as a reference. I think the photographs are the ones that I've taken of my parents, those ones that are, you know, they're no longer here. I don't know if this is answering your questions, of times with my family where my mum and dad aren't here anymore, and I can look back at those, as Kweku said, it's nostalgia. It takes me right back there. But I don't know how to answer in terms of love. when I'm taking something, or the love of a subject matter, or just the interest in it and the wanting to recreate it in a different way.
Thank you. And you, Kweku?
Well, I think it's a difficult question, but I love everything. Basically, I think having life itself is such a gift. It could just be like a rock or a bit of stone or something, you know, that doesn't have any consciousness, can't think or anything. The fact that we can interact with this physical world, and there's an awful lot of beauty in this world. As humans, you know, we generally are pretty good towards one another, apart from when we have wars and fights and what have you. But the average person just wants to get on with their life, don't they, and enjoy the simple pleasures in life. And you know, if you're out walking in the country and you get a connection with, you know, nature, birds, wildlife, or whatever it is, I think that that's kind of like a universal love, if you like. Sort of a love for yourself, a love for being alive, a love for other things being alive, you know. So that's maybe how I can interpret the question as far as that's concerned.
Claire?
It's not a super easy question. Depends a lot on what terms how you're using the word love, I guess. I think love is a overused word in so many contexts, and we put that word on so many feelings and call it all love. So it's not so easy to answer already. Like in the two previous answers, there are two different types of love: love to the subject, with Annie in that case, or a more existential sense of love. If I have to think of it in terms of love, the question was love while taking a photo, right?
Yes.
I guess maybe a sort of sense of acceptance or unconditional acceptance of really being with the subject and with what's happening. A sort of like connection or lack of judgment maybe with what I'm experiencing. So then a sort of sense of like, you know, sometimes if I'm taking photos of a subject, then if I'm really into that moment of photographing, there's nothing else. And then I can spend hours taking photos. I often use macro, so really close-ups. And then I really enter this world inside my camera. And then that's all that exists for that time. And there's not me, and there's no me and no subjects around. So that could be something I would associate to love. But of course, we can use the word love in so many ways inside of language that I think there can be infinite answers depending on how we use that word. But that's what came to mind to me now.
I think it's a good answer.
I agree that being present, that's what I got from that, Claire, you know, just being present in that moment. Not dissimilar to you, Kweku, you know, being present in that moment.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a really good definition, Claire.
I really liked the two words you put together, the unconditional acceptance. So what your photograph, what you're taking the photo of, then there's no barrier between you and the subject.
Yeah.
So I guess then the me just collapses. And I guess in that moment, time also, so maybe you can be there for hours and hours. And I guess in that collapsing, the separation, there's a connection, and I guess that in itself is love. Without having to think about it or do anything about it. And you don't have to describe it anymore. And maybe even the subject matter, even if it's a tree, it no longer is the tree, it just is. The name can fall and it's just taking a photograph. So maybe that's one of the beauties of taking photos, and what Kweku said, that you see then life was just this gift.
Yeah, there's no one seeing in that moment. But so there's no gift. There's only the gift, maybe, but you don't really know it's a gift. That's what it is. But I agree. Yeah. Yeah, and I think on one hand, the medium of a camera in this process, it's quite magical because you can literally look through the lens, and then that's your world. That's the world. If you're painting, you still, of course, if you're close up, you only see the paint and it's about that experience. But in the camera, you're literally seeing only through the lens. So it's really a kind of like bubble. And the bubble becomes reality. That I like a lot about photography.
Yeah, interesting. So what's your line of work then? Not work as such, but when you're doing your art, what do you do then, Claire?
Well, mostly I make installations, which become sort of immersive experiences. So it's lots of elements that combine with each other. So there's maybe sculptures with video installations, with a sound piece. So it becomes a sort of space that it's kind of like looking through the lens of a camera, so to say. Like it becomes this bubble in a sense.
Oh, have you got a website or something we can look at your work?
I have an Instagram for now, but I'm working on a website, yeah.
Right, I'd be interested to see, and the same for Antoinette. I mean, now that we've connected, yeah, I'd like to have a look at your work.
Absolutely. I don't have an Instagram page, but Raan has some of my images that he could forward on to you. Yeah, but you know, it was lovely to see absolutely lovely to see your photography.
Oh,
And
you.
that people are still doing it, you know, and taking the time to manipulate and, you know, do those things, as it is with Claire too. You know, I think it's important that we have creative people, you know, that they are, you know, people with that view that are looking outside and, you know, taking and thinking and pushing the boundaries. It's really important.
I think if more people were artists, there'll be a lot more nicer people in the world.
Yeah. You might be right there, Kweku.
I think it would also be a chaos. Everything would be really messy and unorganized. And really,
we need a balance.
I think it's good there's not too many artists.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the whole system would collapse, I think.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
But for sure, it would be a really colorful world. Even more than what it is. It's already a colorful world.
Yeah.
So the last bit where Kweku asked about getting in touch and watching and looking at each other's work is the premise of this show, I think. And just to connect with people, and there's always learning going on, and I think it's important that, that we can have somewhere that we can share our work, talk about it, and get ideas, so that's the wonderful thing. So I would like to say thank you very much, Kweku.
You're very welcome. Pleasure.
Thank you, Claire.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you, Annie.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I will give you all each other's Instagram or work and share that. And let's all keep in contact, share our work, which will be great. And let's see what happens. I think these are exciting times, I think.
Yeah, good one.
I agree.
So thank you again, Kweku.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for everyone to coming to Raan Oosha's Conversation on Art. And we'll see you next time. Bye.